An introduction to food webs.
Welcome to Panama City Beach. Today we're going to be looking at the aquatic system in the panhandle of Florida. Alright, in order for you to understand about the aquatic ecosystem on the beach, we first need to understand what a food web is. A food web is a bunch of food chains that are overlapping.
Let's review a food chain. A food chain begins with a producer. Energy enters the ecosystem as sunlight. These producers use the sun's energy to recombine atoms from molecules of water and carbon dioxide into food molecules in the process of photosynthesis. So, looking at our aquatic environment, our first producer is seaweed. Producers become the source of food for other organisms in an ecosystem. Other organisms, like the crayfish, cannot produce their own food. It is called a consumer. A consumer obtains energy by feeding on any other organism, typically from a producer. Consumers come in many different forms based on the energy level. The first one, that's the direct consumer, is called a primary consumer. Further on the energy is called the secondary consumer. And then the third level is tertiary consumer. The final part of our food chain, after producer, consumer, is decomposers. In our aquatic system, the picture represents a sea star. Echinoderms, like sea urchins, sea stars, and sea cucumbers, hunt and eat live food, but they also move around and consume decaying organic matter that covers rocks and other surfaces. To be considered a decomposer, it must break down biotic wastes and dead organisms, returning the raw materials to the ecosystem. Now that you've had a chance to go over what a food chain is, pause the video and try making your own aquatic food chain. Now that we've had a chance to review our food chains, here is an introduction to our food web. At the left-hand side, you can see our original aquatic food chain. You have seaweed as our producer, crayfish as a primary consumer, and the human who is eating the crayfish as our secondary consumer. In a food web, we know that these are overlapping food chains. So a crayfish is not the only thing that eat the seaweed. Crabs also eat seaweed. So that is pictured and illustrated with the arrows. We have seaweed as a producer, crab, primary consumer, human, secondary consumer. Another producer you find in the Gulf is phytoplankton. So to the right, you see phytoplankton as the producer, mussels as our primary consumer, which eat the phytoplankton, and then humans, once again, are a secondary consumer. Another organism that eats phytoplankton is krill, which is our primary consumer. A secondary consumer of krill are whales and a bird called an albatross that's located here in the Gulf of Florida. To review, a food web is overlapping food chains. Another way to show and demonstrate the transfer of energy throughout these food chains in an ecosystem is with an energy pyramid. And we will review that in the next video.